I just had a crazy send children to the park with dad moment right before this. I'm like sweating.
Wait, was it planned to send them, or you just like get the fuck out of here kind of?
No, I knew that I had to do this. So I was like, okay, like babies will take their nap, we'll give them snack, and then we'll send children to the park as we do every day. But one of my children decided that he didn't want to have a diaper change, didn't want to wear pants, didn't want to wear shoes, didn't want to wake up from his nap, didn't want to be related to me anymore. Like it was like a full laying on the ground, screaming, crying, and then being like, do you want mommy to come hug you? No.
Wow.
No. It's like, okay, well, I'm gonna go talk about books in like 3 minutes. So
wait, when one of them is wilding out like that, does the other one just watch, or do they just like not care? Really?
It depends. Usually they don't care. If one of them like hits the other one or something and makes it freak out, then the one that did the aggressive physical violence will then fake an injury and also cry. But if one of them is just like having an emotional time, the other one is like, anyways.
So wait, at what age do they start like faking?
Now, I guess.
Oh, okay.
They definitely can fake. Like one of them is like really into hitting the other one, and or like if the older one falls and starts crying, the younger one will be like, I've also fallen and started crying.
Oh.
Or like yesterday, one of them fell and hit his mouth and had like a little bit of blood. And so he cried. And then when we were all good, he went exactly back to where that happened and then started fake hitting his head and fake crying.
Wow.
He was like, thought it was funny then after that. I was like, awesome.
See?
Who raised you?
They seem so tough though.
Like
in the videos, tough. Like they seem like rugged.
They are super tough. Yeah. They are, but they also like love a moment of like, mommy.
Right.
We're still babies. Yeah, definitely thespians in training for sure.
No doubt. I Spy Liberty. Yeah. I love that book. So people can see us, huh?
Yeah. We're like in the world right now.
Okay. Somebody say, yup.
Well, how do we look? I mean, hello. Are we babes or what's up?
Yup. You can begin when you're ready. Oh,
okay. Well, thank you. Appreciate the forced compliments. You know what? I'll take it. You can't see me. Is that true? I can see me.
Yeah, I see you, Traci.
Okay, well. Okay. Check my camera. Everyone sees me but you.
Yeah.
Oh, my pop-in look. Thank you, Leanna. We're friends now. You
told me that's weird though, right?
It is weird.
If Kelly can't see.
Grayed out on mine. Oh, there I am. Hello. Hi, Kelly. Now you can see me in all my glory.
It's a bandwidth thing. I think it's a bandwidth thing. You wouldn't understand.
Is it my bandwidth or is it Kelly's?
It must be Kelly's because everybody else can see.
Oh, Kelly.
Kelly. Yeah, it's okay. Kelly.
Good reminder to close all my tabs. I'm just tabbing out here right now.
Oh, yeah, let me do that.
I got a tutorial going. Okay, we will get started. If I disappear, I'm sorry. It's probably for the best. Okay, so today's panel is me and Kiese Laymon. Kiese, I didn't even plan anything. He's an author. He's a genius. I don't know.
Let's just talk. Let's just talk.
And I'm Traci. I'm the host of the Stacks. Those are our intros. Google us. I don't think anything comes up if you Google me.
You're so silly.
I'm dead serious. I don't think you can Google me.
You're so silly, fam.
One day I'll be Google famous, but for now, just take my word for it. I'm the host of the Stacks. Okay. We're going to get started. Today's panel is called Reading While Black. So I like to always start with the literal place that I'm asked to start because I love to follow a rule. So I want to ask you, Kiese, what does it mean to you to read while Black, either historically or personally or politically or anyly?
Oh man, we're gonna have a real conversation. I thought we were just gonna be what does it mean historically? I mean, it means a lot. One of the things I think is important to sort of note is that, you know, my granny was like punished for reading, not by her parents but by the state, right? Like she was not allowed to finish high school. So you know, reading while Black, I don't know, Traci. I want to talk about it in a different way, like I would if I weren't talking to you.
Okay.
I think reading while Black, to me, is tied into this idea of like Black abundance, which isn't like excellence or, you know, some of those narrow definitions. I think reading while Black, historically, as I said, has meant like death for some people, has meant punishment for others. But also, I think it's important to talk about the joy that it, you know, my grandmother was not allowed to read in some way, read and write, by people in the town and the state, but she did anyway, right? So I think reading while Black is all about subversion. That's all. I'll just be brief. Like, I think it's subversive. I think reading while Black is like crazy subversive, historically, contemporarily. It just is, you know, and I think it's subversive even if we're reading things that aren't necessarily good. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, we weren't brought to this motherfucker to read. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
We brought this motherfucker to do all kind of work and create other people to do work and die. So you threw me off because I thought we were just talking like us. But if we gonna be professional, I'm ready now.
Well, I have some us questions too.
Okay, okay.
Know,
But can I flip it though? Because I feel like what, you know, that's a reading while Black. I'm interested in what reading while Black means to you as someone who actually like has a show, a program. You know what I'm saying? Like, do you feel, and you read a lot of authors, and you read a lot of authors who aren't Black, and you do authors who aren't Black on the show. Yeah. But like, do you have a different responsibility to read while Black, reading Black folk than reading non-Black folk?
I feel like that's a much bigger question of like, what do we owe other Black people,
right,
professionally, personally, creatively? And to me, I think that I read differently personally than I read professionally. So when I'm reading for the show, I'm reading different books than I would read if I was reading just to pick up a book. Before I started the podcast, I read almost exclusively nonfiction that had to do with some sort of crime, not necessarily like true crime, but something like about, you know, Jonestown or something that had to do, you know, and connected to Black people sometimes, but often not. Right. And obviously always reading through my own lens as a Black woman, but not necessarily thinking about reading while Black. Now I think a lot about what it means to read and what I choose to read and what I choose to feature on the show or on the Instagram. And I think there I do have an obligation to all authors, but especially Black authors. I mean, you and I both know publishing is so white and so racist and really diminishes the creative work of Black people in so many different ways. And so I do feel an obligation to read differently when I'm reading books by Black people. And sometimes it's not conscious. Like sometimes I'm like, great, this book was good. Or like, great, this book was shit, you know, but sometimes I'm like, oh, am I allowing other people to critique this book in a way that is, you know, unfair because I personally didn't like it as a human versus like what it's saying on a bigger picture, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. But, you know, and we were having a conversation yesterday, and I did not ask you if I could ask you this. So this might be one of those skipping questions. But this is more of an indictment of me question, right? Because you were gonna do Song of Solomon, right? And you were talking to me because we talked about Song of Solomon before. You talking to me about different people who could do it, and one of the people who I knew could do it was a white woman who writes, I think, very well about grieving and all this other kinds of stuff. And one of the things that you said to me was like, I'm not sure if I want to have a person on the show who's not white talk about Toni Morrison, right? And so like it's like reading while black, but also curating while black and creating while black. And I hear what you're saying is like those are all three different things, right? Like curation while And so I wonder then, would you ever have someone on the show who's not black do an author, read an author with you and talk about it? Like a blackety black author like Morrison, though, like not like a tangentially black author.
So yes and no. Toni Morrison on the show up to this is the fourth Toni Morrison novel that we'll do on the show, and I've done it exclusively with black women. So I sort of feel like that is a thing that we have going at this point. I would be open to doing it with a black man, depending on the book, but Toni Morrison specifically, we're going black women, at least for now. I was open to having a man because it was Song of Solomon, and I felt like that sort of works. I have had lots of cross-racial conversations about books on the show. I've had black people come on and talk about books by white authors. I've had white people come on and talk about books by Asian authors. I'm a black woman, and I talk about books by Asian, Latine, queer, all people who have different identities than me. I think that's part of the show to me, is doing that. But in this specific instance, when it comes to Toni Morrison for this podcast, I feel like a black woman is my first choice, and then a black man is my second choice, or a black woman is my first choice, and then anyone else black is my second choice. And that's just how I handle it.
I feel that.
Yeah. But I mean, like, one of the things about the show that was important to me was that I wanted to be able to talk about books by white authors and talk about books by Asian authors and talk about books and have guests that weren't black, because I get tired of the assumption that just because you are black, you can only do black things, or only be with black people, or only understand the world that is created by black people. Right. And so for me, it was important to have other people on the show talking about books by and about black people, and vice versa, because I think, like, I can speak to this. I get sent books by publishers, which I'm sure you do too. And when I don't ask for a book, 90% of the books that get sent to me are by black authors, which is a joy for me. But also, it's like, if you look at my show, if you look at my Instagram, you know that I read books by diverse group of authors. And it's like constantly this pigeonholing, like that's all we can read. And so I push back on that aggressively on the show and in my reading, and all of that.
I like that. Somebody said they ain't researching. What does that mean? Oh,
they're not researching me, I think is what they're saying. Like, they don't know who they're sending. They just see a black woman and send black.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I get that too, fam. Like, I get that in a different way, like on the blurb tip. And then if you cannot, you're not obligated to blurb anything, but
I literally have a question written down that says obligation to blurb ? That's one of my questions I have for you today. So.
Yeah, I feel a duty to make space in my time to blurb people who, I feel like captivated in some way or another with the book project. You know what I mean? But Roxanne Gabe wrote about this the other day on Twitter. She's like people get real angry and passive aggressive if sometimes you cannot blurb. I couldn't find anybody to blurb my books when I first came out. Victor LaValle was the only person to blurb my book, my first book, Long Division, Victor LaValle, way back in the day. And so I never wanted any other writer, especially black writer, to go through that. So I do I'm very open to blurbing people's books and finding parts of the book that I actually, feel responsible in blurbing. But I think sometimes when somebody sends you something, you might not be able to find that. I mean, people get really upset, right? That's another kind of reading while black, I guess, right? Like, and it's not just black people, but I know this because I blurb so many black people's books. Like the white folks, they try to get my blurbs like harder than the black people, because I think a blurb by me on a white book white people think means something. You know what I'm saying?
I think it
And
means something.
yeah, and so sometimes I'm just straight up like I sometimes can't do it. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not gonna lie. Like I'm not. I mean, I blurb all kinds of people's books, but I'm not as dutiful about blurbing books by people who are white, especially white men. But I do blurb white men's books. But you know, I'm gonna blurb us first, no doubt.
How do you say no? Like if someone comes to you and they're like, "Please blurb my book."
I just say sometimes. Well, I read it. You know, like the thing is, I do read it. I'm like I read it and then I say, I just can't do it right now. So I just can't do it right
You give
now.
them the full Magic Johnson. Not gonna be able to do it.
Right.
I'm not gonna be here.
I wasn't gonna be here. I wasn't gonna be here. Nah, fam. Like it's yeah. You know, I just take that's what I love about this reading while black thing is like. I mean, I love reading and I love reading as a writer, and I take writing so seriously. And sometimes I just think people sort of just want to sort of like, you know, like throw a blurb on the book, Kiese. Throw a blurb on the book. And I've had people be like, yo, I can write the blurb out. Can you put your name on it? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, fuck no, I'm not going to put my name on your blurb of your book. So, you know, it can get dicey though. But at the end of the day, I'm really happy and thankful to be in a space where I can read so much incredible lit, especially about black folk, and blurb it, you know?
Okay, let me ask you this. I'm very curious about your answer to this. When you're reading, I know that you read for work, like when you're blurbing or maybe research or maybe for things when you're teaching. And then I also know that you read for pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
How do you navigate that? What would you read if you never had to read for work? And what would you never read if you only read for pleasure?
Oh, wow. I feel like the answer to that question is so sad. And
You wouldn't read?
No. It's like I don't know that my reading. I don't know that I would read any differently, you know, if I did not have to read for work, which means I find too much pleasure in work and I need to be able to make a distinction. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I don't I mean, I find pleasure in reading bad books. I find pleasure in reading good books. I find pleasure. We're having this conversation the other day, and like, you know, I'm not sure if we're supposed to say this, you know, so I'll say it. You know, like the thing about books, right, is that they're amazing and they're conduits to freedom and all this other shit. But like, I think sometimes we fetishize books. Most books are not good. Like most books have maybe a page that to me in my life, in my reading, in my own books. Like most of my books ain't shit. So I don't think most books are good books. And I think once you understand that and you're reading to get lost and all of that, but also to see, you know, how long one can sustain like what I would consider like an incredible book, like it's pleasurable to me. You know what I'm saying? Like I guess I would just be reading bullshit like ESPN articles if I didn't have to read anything else, you know, on LeBron or fucking like Ja Moran or something like that. Or but I find too much pleasure in reading. I think that's the problem. But you actually say you make a distinction between pleasurable reading for you and reading for the podcast.
Well, yes and no. I enjoy reading, so I enjoy reading for the podcast, but there are definitely times where I've agreed to have someone on the show. Maybe I love them and I start their new book and I don't like it. Right. But like I have, you know, I talked about this at the beginning. I sort of have like a very intense personal moral code around things. Like I wanted to start this talking about reading while Black because that's what I was asked to do. And I have a deal with myself and nobody cares and nobody's ever asked, but like I read every book of every guest that ever comes on the show. Not every book, but I read the book. Mm-hmm. Like if you have 20 books, I'm not reading them all. Sorry.
Right.
But I also review every single book that I blurb or that I review on my Instagram. So any book I finish, I review it no matter what, even if I hate it, which is really hard because sometimes I just would rather not say something at all. I just rather be like, okay. But but that's where reading for work sometimes happens, is like I've had guests who I love them as a writer. I've read their other stuff. They have a new book come out. I'm so excited to have them on the show. I'm so excited to talk to them. And then I start the book and I don't like it. And then that's when it becomes work, because I'm like, I need to finish this because that's the deal.
Right.
So that's kind of where I distinguish like reading for work versus reading for pleasure. Also, I don't get to do every book I love on the podcast, or like every book I love, I don't always get to have the author or do an episode on it. And so there are books that I pick up just because I want to read them that are not connected to the show. So that's what I call like reading for fun, even though all of it is like pleasurable generally.
Right.
Also, when I'm reading not for the show, if I don't like it, I can put it down, which I resent that sometimes. I get to a place sometimes where I'm like, I want to put this down so bad it's not going good.
You know, I've been thinking a lot about how I use the word courage sometimes because I'm being like intellectually lazy. You know, I'm like, oh man, that took a lot of courage, and there's actually some other assemblage of words is not courage. But I think it takes so much courage, fam, to write a review of a book on your own fucking Instagram with your face, your babies, your partner, your everything. And sometimes like I read everything you write on about books, and sometimes you're straight up like, it didn't work. It tried to, but it didn't get there, you know? And I'm a teacher. I've been teaching for over half of my life. I used to be a really good teacher, and I'm not a good teacher anymore. But it's so hard to look somebody in the face and just be like, this ain't it. And I feel like that's what you and a few other other incredible like bookstagrammers do. But I don't have it in me. I can't sit there and like, unless somebody makes me mad. But is it ever scary to let people know, God, like, you know what? Scary. I read your book. I see what you're trying to do, and for me, you didn't do it. Like, can you talk to me about that?
I get like stomach aches sometimes when I know I have to do it. And sometimes what's really crappy is that sometimes authors will like engage with the review that I didn't love their book, and I'm just like, yes. Okay, we can talk offline. I'll send you. Okay. One author left me 7 comments back to back on my review. And here's the thing.
I'm sorry I did that. My bad. Okay. You're going to tell everybody.
I went to theater school. And when I went to theater school, I got a BFA in theater. So it wasn't just about acting. It was we had to study theater and art. So we had to learn how to write about art, how to critique art. We had to do like theater history, all this stuff. And so to me, what I took away from college was that art is something that's put out in the world. And once it's put out in the world, you have to let it go. And other people have to engage with it and critique it. And criticism to me is like one of my other pleasures besides reading. And I critique things that I love deeply. Like my favorite movie, my favorite book, I will have criticism. Like we're doing Song of Solomon, and there's one part of Song of Solomon that I'm like, that is weak. And I know it's Toni Morrison, and she's way smarter and better than me. But like that is what art is for in my mind. Absolutely. And so while I do get really scared sometimes to post things, I do it anyway because A, I'm not that important, right? Like in the grand scheme of things. And B, if the author can't, because the only reason I'm scared is because I'm scared the author's going to hate me, right? Like that's what I'm scared about. I'm scared about someone not liking me. I'm not scared about other people not liking the book. I'm scared that people are going to like send it to a group chat and then boycott the podcast and everyone's going to hate me, right? Like that's like my selfish insecurity, like I'm important, but that's who I am.
Yeah,
but for me, it's like, look, I know people talk shit about me and my show, and that's none of my business. And I feel that way about authors and their books. And I feel like if they want to be in the Bookstagram space, they have to like get a group chat and talk shit. Like when someone writes a mean review of my podcast, I screenshot it, I text it to my friends, and I talk shit about that person, you know? But like, I would never publicly share it. I would never publicly like try to respond to them. I just need a place to vent. And that's why I have my community, you know? And like, it's complicated, and I do feel nervous, and I know that it's like kind of crazy, but like And,
Right.
sometimes authors will be like, well, that's not what I was trying to do. And I never respond. I never respond. Like, what I was trying to do is X, Y, and Z. And I'm always sitting there thinking, well, you just didn't do it as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Like your editor thought you did it probably. Like your publisher thought you did it. Your mom thought you did it. A lot of people liked it. I just didn't like it. You didn't do the thing that you set out to do for me. And like, that's why we have people who criticize art. And that's why I'm not a writer also. Because like, I'm a critic. And I think that, not every writer is a critic and not every critic is a writer. And like, I think when writers, I sometimes get annoyed in the New York Times where it's like, so-and-so reviewed so-and-so's book. And I'm like, but they're friends. Like, fuck that.
Lord. But see, this is where, man, we about to get it in. I love this because it's so hard because there's so few. I mean, people can disagree with this too, but there's so few Black writers. They're just so few Black writers like with publishing deals and shit. And so, it's just really hard to not know a Black writer if you've been in this game like 10, 15 years. And I agree with you. But the thing that's ill is that like white writers will fucking review their damn, husbands, partners, uncles, nieces, and never say, oh boy, slept in my cabin last week. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times they are like, do you know Saeed? I had to be like, yeah, I know Saeed. How well do you know Saeed? Well, we've done a few book events. Do you talk on the phone? Sometimes we text, but you're right. It is tough because like, I'm not gonna, I try to only be friends with the dope writers anyway, so I would never have to, write any shitty reviews. But that's real talk, though. I feel you on that. That's real.
But I hate when white people do it too. To me, it's like criticism should be void of like personal feelings. And sometimes it happens to me. Like when I read your work, I think of you, someone that I consider to be a friend. And like when I read Long Division this year, I was like, I can see Kiese saying that, or like, and like in my review, I think that I put like, I love Kiese Laymon's work. This might be biased as fuck, but like people aren't disclosing that in the New York Times, and like people, I just feel like to review art, of course you bring yourself to it. That's the other thing. Like, it's okay if Saeed's your friend and you write the review and you're like, I love Saeed and he's great. And this is what I love about him. Like, I just hate it when I like open up the book review and it's like, Kiese Laymon reviewing Kiese Laymon. I'm like, this is bullshit. Like, give me a break.
Right.
It's like you blurb that book for yourself and then put my name on it. Like, nice try.
That's true. But again, since we're talking and like we're family. I mean, but I'm gonna be honest with you. Like I've see, I'm getting a little too whatever, but.
Don't get us fired.
No, I'm not going to get us fired. But, how do I say this? Like this industry that appears to be more like Black writer and reader friendly now. And if it is, I think it is because of the work of like so many of us and so many people who made this conference possible, so many writers, so many readers. But at the same time, like sometimes we couldn't even get our work reviewed in any major place. So like, absolutely, I've had friends who've written dope books. They couldn't get the Times, they couldn't get the Guardian or anybody to fuck with them, and they were like, "Kiese, nobody fucking with my book." And I'm like, "I got you. I'm gonna write a review," and that is unethical as fuck, and it's also unethical as fuck to have to like, go up against the layers and layers and layers. I think people, I could go on and on about this, but like, if you look at, you look at Disha, like, do you think the industry did right by Disha? No, Disha fucked the industry up with that book. If you look at Sarah Broom, who's Yellow House, the press didn't give a fuck about that book. That book went out there and Black readers and Black critics and Black authors, like, and the craziest shit is like Black women specifically had to do the same shit for Morrison. Like they had to do the same shit for Morrison. And if we hadn't done that, so I'm saying you are absolutely right to me. And I don't know what to do sometimes with the fact that like we have had to kind of like work in stealth ways to get our books out there because this industry is racist as fuck and it wasn't giving a lot of our great books any attention. So.
Right. I mean, I agree. And I think like that's part of the reason why I do what I do, how I do it, because
Yes.
I'm not technically part of the industry, right? Like
Right.
I'm a media outlet or whatever, but like I don't answer to publishing and publishing doesn't answer to me. And so I feel like I have this unique position where I'm able to say what I think about books. And again, like I read predominantly books by Black authors. I think like 60% of what I read is books by Black authors. And then like maybe 25 is by white authors. And then I'm bad at math, but fill in the blank is by other authors of color. And part of that is just because I read a lot of, like I mentioned, crime-related nonfiction, which is almost exclusively white people, which is a whole other thing. But anyways, but I feel like that's part of the reason. It's like, because you can't actually be honest publicly because you are Kiese Laymon and you're friends with people and you know people and you have to go do a conference with them or whatever. I can be honest because if they want to come on my show and I've talked bad about their book, that's all public and they know it, you know, like,
yep.
And so, you know, I've reviewed books and people have been on the show and then they've like DM'd me and been like, next time I hope you'll give me 4 stars. And I'm like, thank you for coming on the show.
Right.
So I don't know. It's complicated and it sucks. It's so fucking racist and it sucks that we have to be in this position, right? Like it sucks that like you feel or like that people feel like they have to find ways to like rework the whole shit to get acknowledgement. And also on the flip side, I'm like, I don't want to only, because also like, this is, again, I'm very self-absorbed. Sorry, everyone.
So funny.
I live in LA. What do you want to say? But like, I am, again, my like really intense, weird moral compass is like, I care more about what people, if people trust my book opinions than I do if I hurt someone's feelings. So like, I would rather say this book isn't good or I didn't like it.
Right.
Because then when I say that I love your book, I want people to believe me. But if I say everything's great, no one's going to listen to me. No one's going to care.
Yeah.
You know? And so like, that's the luxury of not being in the industry is that like, I get to say whatever the fuck I want. And if people, sorry, are we swearing? I'm swearing.
I don't know.
I'm always swearing.
But let me ask, but this is what I think is also interesting about what they asked us to talk about this conference and what you do specifically, because when you say you're not a part of this industry, what do you mean? What else do you mean?
I don't answer to publishing. Like if you want to write a book and you want to get it published and you want lots of people to buy it and you are not yet Kiese Laymon, right? You're Kiese in 2010. Kiese Jamin. You're Kiese Jamin.
Right.
Dear friend. Love him. A doll. Great writer.
Right.
You have to get publishing to care about you.
Got you.
Like you have to do what they want you to do. If they want you to take out whatever. I mean, you wrote about this sort of in How to Fully Kill Yourself.
Yeah. I got you.
The second, what is that? The second person who?
Yeah, you're the second person. Yeah.
You're the second person. You know, you have to do what the industry wants and you are part of it. And once you like sign your contract, you are part of publishing industry because you're paid by big publishing, if that's a thing.
Right.
I don't receive money from big publishing basically ever. I wish they would pay me to do things. I wish they would advertise on my podcast. I wish that they would, you know, put money into the work that I do, but that's a whole other conversation. But like, I don't answer to them. I'm a media critic. I'm not an employee or a marketer or a publicity. Like I don't work for Riverhead or Scribner. Like I'm my own thing. So that's what I mean by that.
I got you. I like this conversation. Kind of getting it in, yeah.
I like it. I always feel like I have to talk about writing, but my passion is reading, so it's fun to talk about reading.
But when you also talked about, one thing you said is that you're a critic, not a writer. Yeah. I have all my friends that are critics, and I only know that they're critics because I've seen their writing about books / critiques. How is it that you write critiques, but you're not a writer?
I hate writing.
So
you always try to get me to say that I'm a writer. Every time you talk, you ask me this.
I know. I was thinking you're gonna forget and like give me a different answer.
I hate writing.
But then do you feel like you're hoisting writers' writers. I mean, do you think all writers love writing? Like, do you think? Yeah.
But okay. You used to be a runner.
Yeah.
Did you call yourself a runner or did you just run?
Oh shit! See, you got me. I didn't feel right calling myself a runner.
See, I also used to run, and I used to call myself a runner because I found joy in it, and I felt like I was like doing this thing.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I write, but like I'm not a writer or an author or whatever, a columnist. I mean, I am a columnist. I have a column.
You literally have a column, fam. Like, I just don't even. I do not get what you're saying. Like, you literally have a column, and I know, and I read your reviews all the time. But I feel you. But I like the work of being like, that's not what I am. I'm this. Like, you're gonna define you by your own. Yeah.
Let me say it this way: if I could make the reason I have a column is because they pay me. Let me just be straightforward. They pay me, and I need to make money because I have an independent podcast. The reason that I write reviews on Instagram is because that's where I have a large platform there, right? If I could be me and have the stacks and get paid to do other things that didn't involve writing, I would never write another day in my life. And I think writers, even if they hate writing, they want to write.
Oh, well, I mean, that's, I would, let's believe that. That's it. I don't know.
Oh, she's right. Thank you. Right now. A homie. What's up?
Yeah. I mean, but like a lot of writers don't like to write though. I don't know. I don't want to.
I don't think they like to write like in the moment, but don't like people. I don't know. I've heard people say all sorts of things, but it's like, oh, they get in the zone. They don't like the entire time I'm writing, I am miserable.
Right.
As soon as I like click post, I'm like, thank God this is over. I don't have to write another review.
Yeah, I am too, though, fam. Like that's why I feel you, and I'm always trying to like revisit this conversation because the entire time I'm writing, if I was ever writing around you, I swear you would just keep on being like, Kiese, like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, what's wrong with your face? Like, why are you, Because I'm like I don't like this shit is hard. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to feel a fucking white space with words and stories and characters. But yeah, there are those people out there who I talk to who like they love it and they're like, it's like so spiritual getting through it. I wish that was me. That's not me either.
It's not me. It's not me at all. Okay, wait. I have to ask you this because we sort of talked about this earlier. But I did. You didn't. I didn't ask you. So let me ask you. Not for blurbs, but just in general, reading books by non-Black authors, specifically white authors, but not Black authors more generally. Yeah. Talk about it. Do you do it? How often do you do it? Do you have a quota system of like, okay, every time I read a white author, I got to read 3 Black authors, or like, is there any method?
I mean, no, like I don't have all the time in the world, and I don't have as much time as I used to have even like 2 years ago. So I try to read stuff that interests me, and like I wish I could be like ultra Black man and be like, none of that Caucasian shit interests me, like that. But like I can't, you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes, some of the Caucasian shit interests me. Or I think it does, and that's the thing about reading it. You don't know if you're really interested. Like so it welcomes. Like I grew up. I'm older than you. I grew up in a time where like my teachers weren't giving us hardly any Black. I grew up in the blackest, poorest state in the nation, and they weren't giving us any literature by Black people and or many poor people generally, and definitely not Black poor people. And I grew up in the same city as Richard Wright, Margaret Walker Alexander. Blah, blah, blah. And so sometimes I have a resentment toward white literature because of what my white teachers told me white literature was, which was they told me white literature was the literature, right? Like, but that resentment is what created the writerly dog in me. But I'm not like so resentful and so reactionary that I'm like, I'm not going to read this way. And I know, and I got people I love who just like, they don't fuck with white shit. Like, they're not reading the white books. If I try to talk to them about some good shit, a white writer, then they'd be like, no. Keep talking about something else. You know what I'm saying? Like, So yeah, I read white shit. Like, it's not nearly the majority of things I read. Most of the stuff I read is Black stuff, but I don't, it's how you say it. Like, white people and white literature is not powerful enough to keep me out. You know
Right.
what I'm saying?
Right.
It's not
Right.
right.
Right. Right.
I think that's really what it boils down to. It's not like I'm not. Yeah, they're not like they don't occupy that much space in my mind where I'm like I can't fuck with white people reading writing. You know, but I don't want to read mostly white authors because mostly white authors do not interest me. But some of that shit is interesting. What about you though, fam?
I read books by white people.
Of
Like
course,
I do.
right,
I mean, I don't hide that. I do. Because like, okay, one of my favorite books, this is no secret, is Blood in the Water by Heather Ann Thompson.
right,
She is a very white lady from Detroit, Michigan. She wrote the fucking hell out of that book.
right,
Okay. She wrote that book. She put her whole foot in it. And you know what she did? She told the story of Black and brown men that no one else was telling in a academic historian way. There were
right,
memoirs about it. There were first person narratives about it by many of the Attica brothers, but she took it and said, this is actually real history, and elevated it to the status of Pulitzer Prize winning real history
yeah,
in a way that no one else was doing. And so I think that like to say, I'm not going to read books by white people erases a lot of our stories. Blood in the
yeah,
Water by Heather Ann Thompson. Sorry, I should have said that. And like, I think about that book, The Color of Law. I don't know the author's name,
yep,
but that's by a white guy. And like, also, I think people forget that a lot of issues around race and racism were perpetrated by white people. And so they need to write about it.
right,
Right? Like they have the inside access to a lot of that shit, you know? Like an
mm-hmm.
old white dude is gonna be able to write about the color of law and redlining and all of that stuff because his dad probably did the shit. Like
Right, right,
their
right,
history too. And so I think like when we say, oh, you know, we shouldn't be reading books by white authors blanketly because it's not their story to tell. I think sometimes it is their story to tell. I also think that there are a lot of Black people who have been kept out of writing these stories, especially when it comes to like academics and historians. And so I understand that there might have been 5 other Attica manuscripts or
yeah,
5 other like I know what's her name? Kenyatta Taylor.
yeah,
She
yeah,
has
Kiana,
she
yeah,
has she has a book on redlining also. You
yep,
know, like so I'm not suggesting that only white people write that stuff, but what I'm saying more is like in my mind, there are parts of our history as Black Americans and our history as Americans that Black people or other people of color are not being given the opportunity to write, but it doesn't mean that that history isn't interesting or valuable or important and shouldn't be read because it's being written by white people.
I feel that.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely feel that. I
you
mean,
know,
and
and
but can I just say other thing? Like it gets complicated. Like I talked about age and like, I'm a teacher. And so, you know, I've taught a lot of Black writers who are out there doing their thing, but I've taught a number of white writers who are out there doing their thing. So like I find myself reading also my students, and some of my students who are writers are white. So like I just think it gets very complicated. I think in terms
yeah,
of like people's proximity to you and what you owe that particular person. You know what I mean? Like so this
yeah.
dude Connor wrote this book about Confederate monuments, and like
Oh yeah.
that's my dude. Did you had him, right?
No, I didn't. It's a Hub City book, right?
It's Hub City, yeah. And,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I love Connor, so I not only did I read that book, but I love that book, and I didn't just read the book when it came out. I read passages of it before he wrote it, so I'm definitely gonna read that book. So yeah, I don't know. We could talk about this for a long time because
Yeah.
I think it gets complicated.
I feel like, yeah, I
Yeah,
think,
Down Along with the Devil's Bones, great book.
yeah, I think that I think it's similar, but also, this is a great question. How do I feel about white authors writing Black stories? Because I think it depends on who the writer is. And I think it depends on what the story is. I think if a white person wrote Sarah Broom's story, I would be like, fuck that. Right? Like that's her family, that's her story, like a personal narrative. I think it would be another thing if a white writer were to write about New Orleans and the ways that the city was let down prior to Katrina and like the governmental, like, so I think it depends on what the story is. I read Henrietta Lacks. I don't know. I don't know about that one. I think when like white historians are writing about Black experiences versus like events or policy, I'm a little more hesitant.
Right. This is where it gets, and it's and I'm gonna say shit that I don't. Well, maybe I think I might have said this to you, but I don't say this often. But this is where I think when you talk about like certain people are writers and certain people are critics is really important, because in my heart, fam, and like in my heart, and Mark Anthony Neal asked me this one time when I was at Duke doing something. I don't give. I mean, and like in my heart, like not in my brain, but in my heart. I don't give a fuck what these white people write. I don't. Like, I don't give a I mean, in my heart. Now, I understand the logic of what everybody on this talks about. Like, you know, they get more for writing worse about Black shit than we get for writing good. But I'm always like, I'm just going to outright them. And the other people are like, but outrighting them doesn't mean you're going to get what you deserve. But I'm just like, I write. That's true. But like, I'm not the person who's going to be like, I don't want white people writing about such and such and such and such. Because usually they write about that shit poorly. And then somebody be like, yeah, but they write about that shit poorly and often get compensated very well for it. That's absolutely true. But as a writer, I'm not easily impressed or intimidated by whiteness or white writers. So I don't give a fuck. They could try to write my story. They could try to write your story. I think I can write it better than them. That's my heart talking, but that's why we shouldn't talk from my heart in camera in front of people too often. You know what I mean? Like
recording,
right? Oh, is it recorded too? Uh-oh.
Just bleep this part out. That's
no, don't bleep it. Don't bleep none of it out.
Just cut it out. You just cut it out.
Because the white writers know that shit. Like that's what.
Of course they know.
If we really want to talk about something like ill, you should talk about how white writers are shook right now. Like. You know, like for no reason either, but they think, oh shit, the niggas are getting the fucking like movement the moment it's theirs. Please stop. You know, we doing our thing, but they still doing their shit and getting way more than they deserve for almost all of it. Yeah,
for way less. And just to throw in my 2 cents, same thing is happening in the book podcast landscape.
It is. Tell me about that.
I won't name names.
Okay, yeah, don't name names. Yeah.
There are people who are getting imprints at publishers, white podcast hosts who talk about books.
Wow.
Crazy shit like that. And you know, their podcasts are fine.
Wow.
It's just, I mean, it's the same shit. It doesn't matter. It's happening everywhere. It's happening in Hollywood. Everyone's, you know, up in arms about this and that. And, you know, you hear, like, again, I'm in LA, so I'm plugged into this shit. But, like, you hear white people, oh, it's a terrible time to be a white actor in Hollywood. I'm like, oh, wow, interesting. Can someone please let every white actor in Hollywood know that? Because they're freaking bazillionaires. Like, it's, you know, that's, like, part of the whole jig.
And editors we had this conversation privately a few weeks ago. But what's interesting too is editors who acquire Black books are doing this thing where they're like, you know, they acquire a Black book, but then they'll talk about, you know, like we have to pay these Black authors so much money, and I just don't know if the market is going to support them. But fam, like anybody who creates books has to understand it's collaborative. So I just think it's really interesting when like white editors pick Black folks who have earned the right to be fucking published, but then just talk that shit like, you know, if it fails, I don't know. Like, what the fuck? If it fails, that's when we get to see how really invested you are. Because, like, yeah, it's easy to publish one book of somebody, but the thing that white folk have historically that we haven't had is the opportunity to fail. You know, a lot of us fail, we done. And so, like, I don't like the editors who pat themselves on the back for, you know, acquiring Black books, or then out the side of their mouth being like, well, I don't know if this is going to sell. And if it doesn't sell, how's that going to affect the writer? Motherfucker, how's it going to affect you both? You both are putting this book out. You know what I mean? But yeah, so yeah.
No, that drives me crazy. And also, like, I don't have any inside information. So this is just me speculating. I just want to be very clear. I feel in the last little bit that books by Black authors are being under edited. I feel like I've read a lot of mediocre books by Black authors recently that I felt like the editor was too scared to say, this isn't working, or like, you need to change this, or this doesn't make sense. And I feel like there is this thing like, oh, I don't speak AAVE, so I can't take this line out. And like, there's this weird, like, pre-defensive removal. And I just feel like it's letting down Black authors. And it might be happening in white books too. I just don't know. Cause I don't, but like, I'm noticing it where I'm like, wow, this book could have used an editor. This book is 75 pages too long and it's so repetitive. Or there's no storyline here in this memoir. Like, why did you write this book? Did you answer the question you set out to answer? Like all these types of things where I'm like, if the editor is not helping with that, what is the editor's job?
Right. I mean, this is what we talked about, right?
Right.
Like,
We talked about this.
This is our conversation. And my response to that is, I think you give the editors too much credit. Like, editors, like, how do I say this sort of like tactfully? Like,
they're just not doing that much editing. Like I think that they're doing more editing.
Yeah, fam. Like, the assumption that white editors actually could have edited this book better is something that, when they don't have practice even reading Black lit, much less editing Black lit. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't think they're intentionally like letting shit fall off. Like, I just think editors in this nation like haven't had to fairly compete to become editors. So there's no way that they're across the board going to be good at editing, period, or especially editing books from people who they rarely read. They don't understand the traditions. So I don't think they're just out there like, I'm just not going to edit this book. I don't think they know how. It'd be weird if they knew how to fucking edit like Robert Jones. It'd be weird if they knew how to edit Disha. Like, how, and it'd be weird if they knew how to edit like some very, very young new Black writer, because they haven't worked those skills. And again, how do you become an editor? Often you apprentice. You go and who can you fucking apprentice in New York? Motherfuckers who have money. So you're competing against motherfuckers who have money, but like, that means you're not fairly competing. And then you get to become an editor. And editors don't make money, fam. Like, that's the other thing. Right. I mean, some do, but most editors don't make a lot of money. So I don't know. I love that you just said what you said out loud. And I just think, like, I know most editors don't know how to edit. And I hope you aren't. I hope you're not right. But I hope they're not just letting these Black books fail, because when a Black book fails, if you're the editor, you're failing as an editor. Like, you have to be responsible for that.
But do you think that they are being held responsible for that?
Yes, fam. Like, I actually do. Like, in a terrible way, because who are they being held responsible by? Well, a publisher who has even less experience sometimes, like, reading and editing real Black shit than even they do. So at the end of the day, it's not even about whether the book is good or bad or wins awards or not. At the end of the day, it's like, how many fucking books did it sell? And if it doesn't sell, I think publishers are going to be like, well, we can't publish that again. We're not going to give this Black book another chance. And I think editors, instead of taking responsibility, they're being like, well, we tried. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, but those things are different, because I think if a book is great and it doesn't sell, that's not necessarily on the writer or the editor. That's on marketing and publicity, because that's the other part of it. There are so many. I have read at least 5 or 6 great books by Black authors in the last few years that did not sell a ton of books and did not get a ton of recognition, that are some of the best books I've read in the last few years. And that, to me, is 1,000% marketing and publicity. And those are the same people who are editors, like, in the sense that they're young, rich, white people who are able to apprentice and get these jobs. And then they get these books and they don't get it. They don't understand how to do it.
They said which ones? I mean, Michael Denzel. That's the
that's the one that always comes to mind, Michael Denzel. But I mean, even like Disha, if it weren't for the work that you did, and like, I think, if the book wasn't so fucking good, Disha's book wasn't so incredibly good, I don't know that any of us know who Disha is, right? Like, she put her whole foot in that book, and you read it and you told people and you have credit, but like, it was at an academic press. Like, it was going to be a lot harder for her anyways.
No
but
doubt.
Even like someone like Danielle Evans, her book was incredible and it got nothing.
Right.
Like they barely paid attention to that book.
That's real. That's real.
Oh, not Invisible Man. That's not what I'm thinking of. That book is good too, but I'm talking about Stakes is High.
Stakes is High, yeah.
His second book.
It won the Kirkus Award, but
it won the Kirkus. Yeah,
many
I
people
mean,
didn't
this
read
year's
it.
Kirkus Award too. Brian Broom's book, Punch Me Up to the Gods. For me, it was not as good as Michael Denzel's book, but a great book that got no play.
Right.
You know, and like so some of it is like sometimes I think the book is not good and the editors let the author down. And on the flip side, sometimes I think the book is so good and the marketing and publicity let the book down.
No, absolutely. And I can just say this about specifically. There's a young writer
Wait, my light is very dark. I'm just gonna turn my light. It's getting dark in California. It was daytime as I started. Dark in here.
But there's a writer, a young writer who you just had on your show, and this writer created literary relationships with Eddie Glaude and Monty Perry, me, Darnell Moore, Robert Jones, Disha, and the fucking press didn't even reach out to us to do events with this writer, right? And this writer had access to people who are selling books right now. So that's a great point you said about publicity, fam. Like I sometimes forget that part. Like that's real. That's real.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, so I don't know. Not to be so depressing. We're supposed to be talking about reading, and somehow we're talking about how much we hate publishing.
But it's all. But I think this is reading, though.
Part of it, because I feel like I said before, I'm not in the industry, but I am industry adjacent, and I feel like I read a lot different now, understanding these things, right? Like understanding the politics of how books come to be, and that a book could be good and not sell, and a book could sell a lot and not be good, and like those things are not the same, and all of that. I never understood that before. Like I just assumed if it was a New York Times bestseller, it was good. Like, duh. Right. People bought it. Now I understand that if Reese Witherspoon puts her sticker on it, then it's gonna be a New York Times bestseller, regardless of what's in the book, right? And
I think we're at this place where it's like, you can almost have a New York Times bestseller, and as a Black author, because you had a really good opening first 2 weeks, but you can almost, because of the publicity you just talked about, Machine, and other things, like still not move units. And I know that's something we probably don't really want to get into, but I think it's really interesting, like the way this New York Times bestseller list thing kind of works, right? Because I have a lot of friends who got the New York Times bestseller list, but then after the first 2 weeks, because they were on the New York Times bestseller list, publicity didn't do anything to push the book out. They were like, "Oh, it's a New York Times bestseller. We don't have to fuck with it." And that's not good for anybody,
Yeah, it's a mess, and I hate it. Okay, I'm shifting us because we only have a few more minutes left.
Okay.
To what are you reading right now?
What did I read? Basic.
You would think that on a panel about reading while Black, that would have been like the first question. Not with us.
I read. Have you read South to America yet by Monty Perry?
No, but it's like literally right here.
Oh man, I read a version of it like probably a year ago, and then I reread it last week. That shit is good, fam. Like it's scary good. What else did I read? I read my student Tariq White just signed a major book deal. I'm not sure what the title of the book is gonna be because I think the title's probably gonna change. He signed a major book deal with Astor House. Tariq White. I just reread his pages. And this week, what else did I read? I read Asali Solomon's new book, The Afriquite. I don't know if anybody's that shit I think you would love that shit. It's like a rewrite of Miss Dalloway. I don't know if you ever read Miss Dalloway or Virginia Woolf. That shit is hot, the Afriquite. So like that's what I read the last like probably week and a half.
Okay. Yeah. What else do I want to know about your reading? I feel like we got so off track what I had planned that I'm like, what did I not ask him about yet?
Well, we don't have to ask anything. We can. But do you think that this conversation though is about reading, or is it? I mean, like, are reading and writing and publishing and all that kind of stuff like separate for you?
I mean, yes, the personal joy of like sitting down with a book and reading is totally separate from like the political and professional information that I have and learn about publishing.
I feel that.
Right? Like
Yeah.
I just read Song of Solomon for the first time recently, like a few weeks ago. And like, that was like the joy, one of the joys of my life, you know? And like, totally did not think about all of the stuff I know about Toni Morrison's experience publishing and being an editor and, you know, the whole thing until after I finished and was like, okay, let me read some stuff.
Right.
But like that experience of reading, of course, is separate from those other things for me. I know Absolutely. I have that information, but it's separate for me.
I got you. I feel that.
There's so many things. Oh, bookstores. Okay. Oh, okay. This is one of my favorite questions from the podcast. I'm bringing it here.
Okay.
How do you read? What's your ideal reading setup? Where are you? Snacks and beverages. What's the weather? If you're like having your dream reading situation, are you on vacation? Are you on an airplane? Are you in your house? Do you have a blankie that you love? Like, set it up.
I'm surprised I never told you this, but like, I read from the back. Like, I read. I mean, you're not asking me this question, but I was like, oh, I never told Traci this. Like, I read the last.
Wait, hold on. This is you with your book, and you go.
I read the last. I don't read the last page first. I read the last chapter first. I read the next to last chapter next. I read the next to last chapter because, like, as a writer, it just helps me so much understand what the person's doing. I'm sorry, I do. That's how I read. You're
not a person who cares about the first page, the first sentence.
Oh, absolutely. But the first page is the last page for me. And
this makes so much sense now why long division is the way that it is.
Right. And when I'm rereading to revise, I always start from the back and go. But in terms of, I can't eat and read. Like, I used to be one of those, but I think it has to do with like all kind of body image shit. Like when I was running a lot and way too much, I would go to public places and read, public places. And anytime I ate, I didn't feel comfortable eating in front of people. So I always ate alone. So I always had a book. And I don't do that anymore. Obviously, I don't. So I just sort of read on my. I'm terrible. I read on my back. My favorite place to read is in my fucking car. In parking lots. That's a great question. Yeah. What about you though? Have the twins changed your readerly practices?
They ruin everything.
Damn.
I like to read like in my bed on my couch, really cozy. I like to have a black tea with milk and sugar. I'm super British. Can't you tell? I love to be cozied up. I love to have a sock, a whole vibe. Now with my children, I have to sometimes read like in outdoor public spaces, like at a coffee shop. I don't like that. I like to work at a coffee shop, but I like to read privately, snuggly, comfy. I love to read on an airplane, which now with the children is basically out of the window. Like can't read on an airplane with pre-2-year-olds, 20 months, 20, whatever.
Right.
Babies. So yeah, they've ruined my life. This be a lesson to all of you. Don't go down the path. Just enjoy reading. Don't have
no kids. If you want to
anyways. But I still love like a cozy reading. That's my favorite. Yeah. Oh my God, you have kids and need to read with 2 toddlers. Yeah. Reading with 2 toddlers, a hellscape. I think we're supposed to be done now.
Okay. Thank you for this.
This was fun.
It was fun.
I have to be honest with everyone. I was super nervous. I was texting Kiese like, what if we fail?
Right. And I was like, what time is this shit?
And we were both like, how do we log in? So the energy coming in, I think we figured it out. But Thank you. Oh, and thank you so much to Black Readers Con for having us. This is the first ever one. So hopefully we'll all get to do it again. Maybe next year, Kiese and I can come back and apologize for all that we've said today.
Absolutely. And hopefully we can all congregate in some healthy, respectful space in the next few years. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it would be great if we could. So thank y'all for making time for us.
Thank you.